Now, I love me some shiny new motorcycles, and we're about 6 months out from the launch season and the rumour mill is in full flow, so here are my 14 picks for the most exciting bikes expected this year. Now still, to this very day, the most viewed motorcycle announcement on this channel is the Kawasaki ZX-25R. I think it's the fact that it's a super high revving little inline 4 that got people really excited and perhaps a bit nostalgic for the bikes they grew up on. But sadly, it was only ever intended for some Asian markets, and so we're still yet to see anything similar to that in Europe or the US. But that could be about to change, or at least according to topspeed.com, with the ZX-4R name now mentioned in some patent documents last year. Perhaps they can get around the strict European emissions regulations by giving the 250 a bit more capacity and then with a more easygoing or economical tune. They do already have the Ninja 400 in the lineup, but that's a parallel twin that makes about 50 horsepower. So hopefully, if this ZX-4R does come to fruition, it'll offer a bit more poke and sportiness. Now the next one is from zigwheels.com, and it's somewhat related because they're saying that Kawasaki are actually working on a Z400 RS, and they're presuming it'd be powered by the same engine as the ZX-4R that we just mentioned. So the idea would be that it gets the same retro styling as the Z900 RS and the Z650 RS, which is inspired by the iconic Z1 of the 1970s. And I think it could solve a bit of a dilemma for some potential customers. You see, not everyone wants the full 110 horsepower of the 900, but the parallel twin in the 650, it is a solid performer, but it's got that 180 crank which doesn't give it a great sound, and the performance is just okay too. For some people, I reckon a more revvy, lively inline 4 would be more fitting in that visual identity, and yet it wouldn't have the full cost and weight of the big 900. So yes, this one sounds like a great proposition to me. Moving on to Honda, and this one has been reported all over the place. So Zigwheels, Cycle World, Visor Down, and it's the news that they're working on a pair of scramblers, one with a 250cc single and the other with the same 471cc parallel twin that you'll find in the current Rebel 500. These bikes look pretty much nailed on because there's some fairly detailed patent documents that outline the design, and these renders that are circulating are only speculative, but it just goes to show that it could be a pretty good looking bike with some references back to the CL450 Scrambler that was launched in the late 60s. Very attractive indeed, and yet it should be pretty efficient for Honda to produce because they're just repurposing an existing platform as opposed to developing it from the ground up. But they're not the only ones developing a cost-effective little scrambler bike, because Triumph has also been spotted out testing, including by yours truly. It's the result of a partnership with the Indian manufacturer BAJAJ, who also make the sub 390 bikes for KTM, and yet I spotted this one in the UK at a petrol station just off the M5. Honestly, I really liked the look of it, and I've already published a full video with all the details that I could get, and I've linked to it in the description just in case you haven't seen it already. Now over to webbikeworld.com, and they speculate that Honda are also working on a new NX500, which again, that name's been patented, and it's no doubt a nod to the NX650 Dominator, which is a bit of a cult status big single dual sport bike. Now one could assume that if the NX500 did come to market, it'd probably repurpose the Rebel 500 engine again, and you'd think it'd be a little more off-road biased with a taller stance and bigger wheels than the CL500 we just mentioned. Basically, you'd want like a Baby Africa twin, which would be very cool indeed, although I suppose to some extent the current CB500X does that job. It is predominantly road biased though, with a little bit of gravel riding possible, and so it would be awesome to see something a little more aggressive from Honda. Now before we get on to the next bike, which I'm very excited about, I just want to say a massive thanks to Pando Moto for sponsoring the channel. They provide me with some awesome gear for both on and off the bike, and at the moment with the weather getting warmer, I've actually been really impressed with their Caldo jeans. You see, they're just as good as any of their other jeans. They're abrasion resistant, they take knee and hip armor, but in the places that you don't need quite as much protection, they've actually got some mesh panels to help keep you nice and cool, and I just just think they're brilliant. Plus, they've got some super stretchy sections at the knee and on the back, and so they're extremely supple and comfortable to wear for a long day in the saddle. There's a link down in the description in case you fancy checking them out, and once again, a massive thanks to Pando for their support. Now, CycleWorld.com reports that last year, a patent was filed for an 896cc double overhead cam V-twin that's basically the same as the engine that was last used in the Aprilia Shiver and Dorsoduro. The only big visible difference is that it now gets the Gilera badge on the cases, and it's actually the Piaggio Group's Chinese partner, Zhongshen, that's getting it back on the road. In fact, they're at the point now where prototypes have actually been spotted out testing, and I, for one, am very excited. You see, last month I made a video looking for the best used naked motorcycles that you can buy for under $5,000, and I narrowed it down to basically the 1050 Speed Triple and the Aprilia Shiver. Now, I was super surprised with how much I actually liked that bike, and I ended up announcing it the winner of that particular test, despite the fact that on the spec sheet it looks quite a bit less exciting. But a big factor was the engine. Bags of fun and yet easygoing enough to enjoy riding it on the road, and the soundtrack was beautiful. So yes, I for one would like to see this engine back on sale, even if it's made in China and even if it's got a different brand on it. Next up, the Hindustan Times. They're talking about Kawasaki's ambitions to go fully electric by 2035, and their first ever electric model is imminent, with this teaser posted on their Twitter account. But it seems like they're starting small because it's probably going to be a kid's motocross bike, so not exactly the electric ninja that you might have been hoping for. It kind of reminds me of when Indian copyrighted the name EFTR and everyone got super excited, and then they launched this. Now, remember the Harley BRONX? It was one of the 3 bikes that they announced, along with the Pan America and the Sportster S, that was going to be powered by their new liquid-cooled Revolution Max engine. The Pan America has the adventure bike category covered off, the Sportster is the sort of quick cruiser, and then the BRONX was meant to be their sporty naked bike, which is a massive market segment, at least over here anyway. But a new guy came in at Harley and changed some of the strategy, and the BRONX got dropped, and then that was the last I thought we'd see of it. But now RideApart.com are reporting that in April this year, Harley filed a trademark again on the BRONX name. So yeah, they're probably just protecting their brand and their IP, but there is a slight chance that we might see it on the road one day. And it seems a shame for it not to, because they were most of the way there. The 975 Revolution Max is decent. I've tried it out recently on the new Nightster, and it's plenty of fun. You just can't hustle that bike too much because it's a cruiser chassis. So the BRONX, I thought it'd be pretty good. Next bike is from Royal Enfield. I get quite a few DMs and comments about this one. It's the Himalayan 450. And to me, it's massively welcome news because that bike really does need an extra shot of power. I've tried the Himalayan, I've tried the new Scram 411, and it's fine on a easy going back road. But when you get on the A roads and if you want to do a bit of motorway, 20 odd horses just doesn't feel like enough for a bike of that size. So the 450 is meant to be a brand new bike, a new engine with a shorter stroke, and it'll also be liquid cooled, and BikeWhale.com are saying that it's expected to make 40 horsepower peak and 45 Newton meters of peak torque. You know, that's a really substantial increase, and it looks a lot more competitive versus something like the 390 Adventure from KTM. Now back to the UK with Triumph and MCN are reporting that they've been spotted out testing with an updated version of the Street Triple 765. Now, it doesn't look massively different to the current Street Triple RS. There's just a tweak to the riding position with some raised clip-ons instead of flat bars, and also a higher spec Öhlins fork, and so they're kind of speculating that it could be a Street Triple TFC. That stands for Triumph Factory Custom, which is a run of specific models usually, with higher spec components and extra special finishes. So far they've done a lot of Bonnevilles, and they started off with the Rocket 3, but nothing of the Roadsters or Adventure bikes, and so it really would be interesting to see what a fully specced out bling Street Triple would look like. Now also from MCN, and in the sporty middleweight naked category, it's the 990 Duke that's expected from KTM. I absolutely love the 890s, and so I get on pretty well with this one too, I reckon. They're saying there'll be an update to the engine to meet the next set of emissions regulations, and yet a 100cc increase will will help them to deliver similar or slightly better performance. There's also a new swing arm and more aggressive bodywork and a little bit of new styling, but you know, nothing massive. It's not a complete overhaul, but it doesn't really need to be because the 890 is already absolutely banging. Now from adventurepulse.com, and there's potentially an update to the BMW R9Ts, specifically the Scrambler and the Urban GS. Now if you've ever ridden one, you'll know that as soon as you hop on it, you can kind of tell it's just a road chassis with some off-road inspired styling tweaks. It's nowhere near as tall as something like the Triumph Scrambler 1200 XE, and so if you were riding off-road and you want something that looks retro cool, that'd easily be the better choice with the extra ground clearance and travel, and also the big 21-inch front wheel. BMW seem to have noticed this, with both the Scrambler and the Urban GS out being tested. Yes, with bigger 21-inch front wheels, also the headers and the oil cooler have been tucked away for a bit more clearance, perhaps a bit taller sprung, and then some more off-road specific bits like the foot pegs. To me, sounds like a lot of fun. It'd be a proper retro version of the GS. Now again from MCN, there's a potential update coming to HUSQVARNA's SVARTPILEN 401, which is a great little learner-friendly bike with bags of style. They reckon there's a new engine, new trellis frame, new subframe, and it gets a bigger fly screen with potentially a new TFT dash, and that'd offer a lot more functionality than the current LCD display. And then also from the KTM group, and this story comes from Cycle World again, there's the 1290 Super Duke R spied out testing with a bit of a visual tweak. The engine and chassis look to be the same, but there's a new stacked headlight design similar to that on the 990 we mentioned earlier, and some new bodywork to complement the revised shape. So perhaps we're moving to a new visual identity for the KTM soon, and away from that current highly distinctive insect face. As always, I'd love to know what you think of these potential new bikes and which ones you're most excited about, so leave me a comment down below, and if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.